Well, struggling in school is one thing, but should all kids in our province go through universal screening for learning disabilities? There's a bill right now that's being put forward that's trying to make that happen so students here don't fall through the gaps. Today on the podcast, what's it like when your brain won't allow you to learn?
I always like trying, and I always have to be like partnered up with people, and I wanted to know like how to do it on my own. Because last year we did lots of like tests, and I was only in grade 3, and it was like really hard to like figure out because I couldn't read the questions as well.
We start to see their self-esteem erode. We start to see mental health issues, and there's a disconnect with them wanting to show up at school. The faster that we can protect a child's confidence and get rid of years of frustration, we need to get away from the waiting for them to fail model.
It was a guessing game for me. Is that an I or an L? And they can't prompt you because they have to see where you are. Grade 2 and 3 were probably my tougher grades. And then the comments came, well, you're not trying hard enough. You're just making excuses. So then I started memorizing letters, words. So please bring this in. Please help our children, empower them as they get older.
That was Winnipegger Melanie Rosenfelt, and she is older. She was diagnosed with 2 learning disabilities at the age of 43, ADHD and dyslexia. And that little cutie you heard right at the beginning, that was Blake Neufeld. She also has dyslexia. She's 9. Both of them are in support of Bill 225. That's the Universal Screening Bill. As you can probably imagine, so is the Learning Disabilities Association of Manitoba. But the Manitoba Teachers Society says it's not that simple. We're going to hear from MTS a little bit later in the podcast with their point of view. I'm Marcy Markusa, and This is Manitoba chose to explore this today because, well, we had so much feedback. We started looking at this on CBC Radio, and listeners to our local morning show in Manitoba just started writing in. I've been a journalist for a long time. I don't often get the Manitoba School Boards Association chatting me on Facebook saying, hey, please put us on. We want to weigh in on this. We had teachers writing into us at CBC suggesting that we tried certain things in our classrooms. They wanted to share what worked for them when they were working with kids. And then a lot of Manitobans wrote in talking about their own experiences, not unlike Melanie, saying they went years feeling like they were quote unquote stupid until they understood that they just learned differently. So would this bill change any of those experiences? Let's get to it. Bill 225 was put forward by a Liberal MLA, Cindy Lamoureux. It would require every kid in Manitoba, every student, to be screened not once but twice a year between kindergarten and grade 3. Blake Neufeld does live with dyslexia. She's 9. Here's more of what she had to say to my colleague, Josh Crabb.
It was hard because like the reading, it was like really hard because like of the reading, and like it made it act like worse, and it was like really hard to like read with like other people or like reading to the class. And yeah.
Because you didn't know that there was a problem.
Yeah.
But now you do, and you're able to get tutoring?
Yeah.
And is that helping?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had some really hard times before finding out that you went home crying. Was that just because you were trying so hard? And
because I was like trying, and I can't. It was because I always have to be like partnered up with people, and I wanted to know like how to do it on my own.
So how did you actually find out that you had some challenges?
Well, it was when we were at school, and she explains the things, but then when I get to work, then it becomes like hard when like if we're doing, because last year we did lots of like tests, and I was only in grade 3, and it was like really hard to like figure out because I couldn't read the questions as well, so I didn't know like how to like how to do the questions right.
Blake Neufeld, she lives with dyslexia. She's 9 years old. She was at an event last week for folks supporting this bill that's been put forward by Liberal MLA Cindy Lamoureux. Well, Karen Velthuys supports it too. She's the executive director of the Learning Disabilities Association of Manitoba. Good morning.
Hey, Marcy.
How did listening to Blake there make you feel? What were you thinking about?
I actually started getting tears in my eyes, quite honestly. Those are students we hear from every day, and it was just so wonderful to hear her articulate how she's feeling.
I would ask what you think of universal screening, but I actually want to phrase it differently because having done a lot of reporting on dyslexia in this province and screening, I know that not all of the screening tools are necessarily the same and there can be challenges with diagnosis. What do we need to do to make universal screening effective for the most kids in this province if this, a la this bill or another method?
So I honestly would like to see us start screening even before school starts, Marcy. That's one of the things that I'm hoping that we can get to in this province. So we know that kids who are preschool already can show signs of having a learning disability. So it shows up in ways such as phonological awareness challenges. They might have difficulty rhyming, trouble remembering sounds. And we see that even before they enter kindergarten. So it would be wonderful if we could get to that place where we're screening before kids even go into school buildings.
And do the medical professionals in this province have enough awareness, education, resource to be able to do that screening consistently right now, or what would we need to make that happen?
I think it would be, a place where our organization, for instance, could support that. Right? We know that there's screeners that exist that are universal that really would pick up on some of that, those challenges that are happening, and we could do that through daycares, through preschools, through family centers. There's many places that kids show up that we could, for instance, like we do hearing and vision screenings. We could be doing it before they enter school so that we're kind of doing a wholesale screen to see if there's any challenges that may exist when they enter a school building.
This bill 225 obviously isn't looking at that youngest set. It's saying screening twice a year between kindergarten and grade 3. Although that's not ideal for you, what are your thoughts on that, how it's proposed?
I think, anything we can do that we're doing, not doing now is better than not doing anything. Right? If we can stop those challenges that, kids like Blake are experiencing when we don't know that she's struggling to learn how to read, those at least will start picking up those challenges. And the faster that we can protect a child's confidence and get rid of years of frustration, we need to get away from the waiting for them to fail model and helping them support them before we see them failing.
You talked about confidence. What are the other things that are affected in a child if they go undiagnosed and they're struggling with a learning disability?
Absolutely. So, we start to see their self-esteem erode. We start to see mental health issues come to the foreground. And there's a disconnect with them wanting to show up at school. Right? We start to see them having headaches and stomach aches and saying they don't want to go to school. And their relationship with school becomes very tenuous in that they don't feel supported and comfortable being in that situation.
There may be people that will argue teachers are already noticing and flagging learning disabilities in the classroom and that we don't need universal screening. What's your sense of that already teachers are catching this?
Absolutely, and teachers do notice, but sometimes by the time it becomes obvious in schools, kids are already struggling. So the formal screening would be proactive. It helps us look for risk factors before the struggles even appear. And, it's, again, especially critical for kids like Blake that have learning disabilities, because the earlier we intervene, the better the outcome.
Parents at home, what should they be looking at to recognize early signs of a learning disability?
Yeah, as soon as language starts developing, right? We hear kids start to babble and make sounds, right? Before we even start words, we're making sounds. So rhyming is a particular flag. If kids can rhyme, isolate different sounds, Just even the ma, 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 da, 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 right? They're starting to make those sounds. So just paying attention. And the other thing is that we know learning disabilities are genetic. So if we do have a parent who perhaps has been diagnosed with a learning disability, keeping an eye open for some of those signs. If there's a parent that has been diagnosed, then that's also important to look at.
And it's so interesting, too, because between the generations, of course, a lot of those parents might have gone undiagnosed because it was such a different time that may not have been available. So families now are sometimes double catching up.
You're so correct, Marcy. Sometimes when kids are getting diagnosed, parents are also getting diagnosed at the same time. So there is that. But once parents understand that their child has been struggling, they are able to see some of those challenges they had as well in school.
Thank you for your time, Karen.
Of course. Thank you.
Karen Velthuys is the Executive Director of the Learning Disabilities Association of Manitoba. This is Manitoba, and before we continue to get another perspective on this bill that's part of our focus of our episode today, we have a new way for you to connect with us, and I just want to mention it here. We have an email, so write to us. This is manitoba@cbc.ca. If you do, maybe you have a story like Melanie Rosenfelt, who wishes a bill like Bill 225 would have been around when she was younger. She is a person I was mentioning earlier that was diagnosed with 2 learning disabilities at the age of 43. Can you even imagine? How did she get by all of those years? She has ADHD and dyslexia. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me a little bit about what it was like for you in school. I was listening to Karen and I was seeing you nod a little bit to some of that. Yeah.
School was tough. When you would be having to test with the teachers to read, to guess your letters. It was a guessing game for me. It was like, oh, is that a B or a D? Is that an I or an L? And they can't prompt you because they have to see where you are.
What was it like for you? Like when you think about little Melanie, what grades were sort of, are there moments that stand out or grades that stand out that were particularly tough because you didn't know what was going on?
I would say grade 2, more so grade 2 and 3 were probably my tougher grades. And also there would be letters that got home from school saying Melanie needs help. But my mom was also diagnosed and fighting cancer at that time. So I hid the letters because I knew they had enough going on. I didn't want to add more to their plate. And then the comments came, well, you're not trying hard enough. You're just making excuses. And how am I going to backtrack that, saying, I'm not making excuses. I just don't understand what's being presented in front of me. So then I started memorizing letters, words, because at my diagnosis, I found out I don't have phonics. I can't sound out a word. I can memorize what it says, but to sound out a letter, or not a letter, but a word, I don't have that capability.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting because I interviewed a woman years ago from Manitoba that learned to read late in life, but the way she hid her, her lack of literacy was similar. She talked about memorizing, and sort of, hiding this. What does it feel like when you're doing that and you're struggling,
It's embarrassing. I mean, when you're put in a class and you're told to read out what the word, or read out a paragraph, it's your turn. The anxiety and not only of not understanding what's in front of you, but now you're sharing it with your peers and the teasing that goes on with that. There could be a lot of elimination for kids having to feel that and taking it into their adult life.
So what's your reaction before we get into your diagnosis and what that meant? What's your reaction to hearing about this, bill being put forward and the group backing this up to for the universal screening for learning disabilities to be done, as I mentioned, twice a year and maybe even earlier?
I say, please go ahead with this. Please enforce this bill. I have a child who wanted to get diagnosed, but because of a split family, their dad wasn't into the diagnosis because he thought it was just going to be an excuse for the child. So when my child turned 18, they came to me and said, Mom, let's go. Well, they have a learning disability. So maybe if that testing was done in school, it could have helped them and they could have had a lot more support as they grew up. So please bring this in. Please help our children. Empower them as they get older. School's hard enough. Put a learning disability on top of that. Here's the struggle. You're being picked on by peers. You're being made to feel dumb. You already feel like you're not at their level. So why wouldn't we empower our children? They're our future.
I love that you said, that someone in your life thought it could be a crutch, because that, nobody wants that to be the case. But the reality is, if there's a problem there, like you're saying, let's get it early. What did it feel like then for you? I mean, you were, as I mentioned, 43 to get your diagnosis. What was that like for you?
So it felt like, I use the word empower a lot because I felt empowered. I already knew it was there, but to hear that I wasn't trying hard enough, or I'm just making excuses, but to have this piece of paper, which it qualified me qualified, that's not the right word, but it validated me. It was like, here you go, Melanie. This is who you are. And it was like, thank you. Now let me carry on with my future. I have a lot of drive. I have a lot of passion. I want to make a change. So
what led you to get testing done? I'm curious.
So in the profession that I was first in, I had to get a professional designation. So it was 5 exams I had to write. The first 2, I had enough experience, memorized what I was doing. The third one was a struggle. So I went to both universities in Winnipeg, Red River College. I reached out to the course the institute that the course was being run by. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just need some help. Do you have in-class learning? Do you have tutors? Nobody had tutors. So I was presented with a letter that said, if I didn't get this designation by a certain timeline, I didn't have a job.
So you were facing losing your job if you couldn't achieve the designation. Did anyone around you understand that you were, memorized yourself up to this point? Like,
no.
So who did you tell first? Or, you know what I mean? That took a lot of courage.
So I went to my family doctor and I said to her, this is my situation. I stand to lose my job, right?
Yeah.
So she expedited me, or she didn't expedite it, but she sent me to Red Ladder, where I met with Dr. Robin Legg. And I met with her at the end of September. We did an intake. I did my formal testing October 9th. And November 9th of 2020, I had my call with her. And she was like, here you go. This is who you are.
Can we just talk about who Melanie is? Because I heard you have a 4.35 GPA back at school. What helps for you now when you think of resources or even in the workplace? What helps? And there's some tech I heard that's helping too, right?
There's amazing technology. So I had to go to my current employer and I asked for permission to come and do the interview. And before she said, yes, but I just want to know, is there anything you need from us to help your job, make your job easier? And it was like, wow, right? So I have the help through school. I have the help through work. I have the help at home. So it's I always say it's my superpower. I am dyslexic for a reason, and let's help anybody who is in that same scenario.
So for those that are listening, and I'm going to ask about the adults, as you were when you got your diagnosis, what would you say to someone that is afraid to get a diagnosis? Or maybe they're thinking, okay, maybe they're doing the same thing. Maybe they've memorized their way through a lot of their life. They're thinking, I'll just carry on in this way, and something's preventing them from going. Call
me, reach out to me if you need a support. It's scary, but it's worth it. To be validated in your truth, there's no words for that. You've got the courage to do it. You've done harder things. We're built to do hard things as human beings, and to put yourself forward and be your true self. I mean, that's a power.
You talked about your current employer. I'm just curious, as an adult leading up to all of this, post-diagnosis, had you lost jobs before, had trouble holding down jobs because of this?
I jumped jobs, I would say. Yeah. So I had to leave my job where I needed that designation because there was no help. And time was ticking to get 3 exams done.
Got it.
Where you don't understand. So, yeah.
Congratulations on all of this. And thank you for being a role model and an inspiration to people that are listening for this. If you want to reach out, we're not going to give Melanie's number over the air here, but you can always call us at CBC. I'll give you those numbers in a minute. We'll pass it along. I'm grateful for you being in. Thank you for being here.
I'm grateful for you. Thank you for your time.
That's Melanie Rosenfelt, diagnosed with her learning disability at the age of 43. Well, I have some other numbers to throw to us here for context, and not just in Manitoba, but across the country. Between 5 and 10% of Canadian school-aged children meet the criteria for a learning disability. And that comes from the Canadian Pediatric Society. So this is obviously on the radar of educators across the country. Somewhat surprisingly, Lillian Klausen, president of the Manitoba Teachers Society, says that it's not that simple to just put in universal screening for kids for learning disabilities in Manitoba and think that that's going to solve everything. She thinks that it actually still needs to live with assessments in the classroom. So first of all, to the bill itself, the idea of universal screening twice a year for learning disabilities, what are your thoughts on that? Is it a good idea or not?
So what's important to know is that our teachers are screening students all the time from the time that they come into schools throughout the year. And so our concern, I guess, is when we hear words like standardized testing, universal screening, we understand that students don't all learn the same way, and we don't assess them all the same way. So teachers have a variety of tools that they use to assess students throughout the year. They have a variety of strategies that they use to teach students throughout the year. No one student will respond the same way to a universal or a standardized test as another student. And so who's administering these tests, who's reading these tests, those parts aren't standard. And so what do the results look like at the end, and who's reading the results and doing what with the results? I think we are used to a one-on-one approach with students' needs, and that we need to continue to do that to be able to get a better handle on what the learning needs and learning goals are of each of the students in the classrooms.
Would the help, though, in trying to be, as our guest said there, Karen Velthuys, proactive about catching kids before maybe even they're in the classroom, though this bill is at the older ages, not be welcomed by teachers who, as we know, have a lot on their plates already?
So I do agree with one of the letters that you read earlier. When students come into the classrooms, the teachers can identify very early on what some of those learning needs are. And so when students come into kindergarten classes already, some of those learning needs are identified from the very beginning. And the tools that we already use, the variety of strategies that we use, the variety of assessment tools that we use already give some of that information.
But do teachers have the time, though, to do it regularly? Because, and if they don't, what resources could be added to the system that would help that happen if you believe that it has to stay in the classroom with the teachers who know the kids, as you're saying?
So yes, the teachers do take the time to do it regularly when it comes to the variety of assessment tools. So the observations, the communications, the testing that they do in the class. What takes away from that is when you want to bring in a standardized test or a universal screening where we're spending time doing that work, learning about the tool, trying to figure out how the tool is supposed to be used, how to read the tool, how to assess and find the data. That takes a lot of time. And it also takes a lot of resources and money. When we're talking about funding in schools and some of the underfunding that we have, is this the best way to use money? Maybe it is bringing in our specialists. We know that our specialists that are working at the divisional level or at the school level, the reading clinicians, those that are helping with the supports, we have less of those now than we've had in the past because of funding cuts. And so if we are throwing money into students with learning disabilities like we should be, maybe we should be doing it in a different way, and not with assessment tools, but with people who can come in and help answer to those needs of students.
So that kind of echoes what the letter that I read here that says assessment isn't the issue, but it's actually then once you know a student has a learning disability, what do the supports look like through the school system? Is that an area then that needs support in your view by teachers in this province?
That is absolutely what is needed in the province. We sometimes have school divisions who have specialists like reading clinicians that work within the division, but then we assign the reading clinician to the 40 schools that are part of the division. How can one person come around and provide services to every one of the students that have needs in each one of those schools? And so if we are looking to really help students with learning difficulties, then we need to put in place some people who have specialty areas who can come in and do some of that assessing on on a one-on-one basis, not a universal or a standardized type test, but actually meeting and speaking with the student and designing some strategies that can help that student. There's a variety of strategies that we need to be looking at, and we can try different strategies with different students. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. That's why we need a variety of tools and strategies, because not everyone answers the same way to the same types of interventions that we want to bring into place.
If you are reading a clinician, somebody, a specialist for 40 schools, I mean, that's staying with me, that number. If you had, though, a specialist in each and every school that could do, let's lose the word universal, because I know you stated that that's sort of something that's concerning for you. But if you had a specialist in every school, you had that bigger resource there all the time, and they were able to support teachers with their input, but support them to do maybe regular screening to see what's going on with the kids more regularly, would that be the ideal, or is there such a thing as an ideal model that would support this? Because kids are falling through the gaps.
Sure, that would be more along the lines of what we would like to see. When it comes to interventions with individual students, that's what we would like to see. And so if we have specialists in a variety of areas who are working either at the divisional level or at the school level, accompanying the teachers who are able to communicate with them the needs and the goals of the students, that would be certainly ideal.
In terms of the idea of having this, the bill says in school, but even at preschool, I'm going back to the standardized testing, but if you did test kids more at the preschool level, so when they came into the system, you would know who's identified with a learning disability. Would that be something that, through your lens at Manitoba Teachers Society, you think would be beneficial?
So it's difficult to say, because what does a test look like for a preschool student, and what kind of information does that give you? I think interacting with students, learning about students on a one-on-one basis when they're coming into preschool programs or into early childhood programs is when you're learning what the learning needs of the student are.
What would you say to a parent who is in support of this and feels like, in the meantime, when the funding is not there, that this system would do more good than harm, that it would catch kids who are, haven't been diagnosed because, as you mentioned, teachers are so busy as well?
I think that's the key as well. I think the key is the communication between the parent and the teacher. If the parents are seeing signs of some learning difficulties at home, or if the teacher is seeing signs of learning difficulties at school, the communication between home and parents and schools is actually what's going to bring out this information that we need to be able to be successful with the student in the classroom. And so the more information that we have about the student, whether that be our direct observations in the classroom or what a parent observes at home, that will help us do this assessment and then be able to bring in some interventions for students. I
know that you have shared with CBC that you think that if this universal tool goes through, it would be, this is your language, a disservice to public education. How would it be a disservice to public education?
I think it's a disservice because we're concentrating funds and monies in the wrong areas. Who's building these universal assessment tools? Is this a part of privatizing education in Manitoba? Are we looking at spending money in the wrong area? I think without the contributions of the education system with these decisions, when we're talking about universal assessment or standardized tests, we're doing a disservice. We need to be a part of the conversation. We need to see what this is looking like. We need to see what the best practices are for our classrooms and best practices for our students.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning with your perspective on this topic. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Marcy.
Lillian Klausen there, the president of the Manitoba Teachers Society. Well, one more reminder, if you have feedback on today, email us directly. This is Manitoba at cbc.ca. I'm Marcy Markusa. That's our podcast for this week.